Welcome to another episode of Just Vibing, episode 12 here with Danny Breslauer. Obviously, you've done a lot of different things, Danny, and definitely wanted to chat about a lot of those different experiences as you kind of make your next step with the DMB Progress consulting. But first of all, I mean, I know you're also a WRSU alum, Rutgers alum. You've been involved with sports broadcasting. Definitely want to chat about that. But yeah, I mean, like, how's everything going? And if you could just give me and the viewers like a quick introduction about yourself, and then we can get started from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the shout out of my less than a week old LLC. Just putting some consulting infrastructure in place. I'm figuring out the next step within media technology and sports on the business side. I've been in that world for about a decade now. The quick bio blast. I grew up in Highland Park. Obviously, basically growing up on Rutgers campus. My dad's
pretty much, yeah,
for more than 50 years. I went to Rutgers undergrad, as you said, coming out of Highland Park, worked for WRSU, was the sports director 08-09 and the general manager 09-10. That final year, Rutgers was launching Night Vision, which is now RVision, as the over-the-top direct-to-consumer service for streaming. And we were one of the first, if not the first, major Division I program to have an in-house streaming department. I think Ithaca College had one early, but obviously they're not on Division I. They're fairly well known on the broadcast side of things. So Tim Pernetti and Jason Baum at the time were setting up the network. They brought me on to be the lead play-by-play guy, and I ended up using that as a tentpole item of like a freelance sports broadcaster portfolio. So I did that for 6 years and then transitioned, got my MBA at NYU, and for the last decade have bounced around media and tech companies in business development and partnerships roles.
Yeah, no, that sounds pretty cool. I mean, it seems like you've kind of been all over, the sports side, sports broadcasting from, I mean, you played in high school, soccer and baseball, and then of course, Rutgers, being in WRSU, like I know how that was. So, you're both the sports director and general manager. You call a lot of games over the air. I guess, you did it a little bit like not a few years before I guess I did, maybe a little bit more than that. But what was that experience like? I know Rutgers was back then in the Big East for all sports, I guess. But how was that experience? I mean, I know there's a lot of travel involved, and there's you make a lot of friends, and broadcasting, like I guess that was kind of the start for you and for a lot of people, and you even made it all the way up to becoming the number 8 sportscaster in the nation for the 2009 Jim Nantz Award. So if you could just, I guess, take me back to your time at WRSU and what that was like for you all those years ago.
Well, I mean, as you said, some of my best friends in life are the guys that were on that WRSU sports staff, right? Like you end up becoming a brotherhood. It's your frat in a way.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, in a way it is. Yeah, it's like your brotherhood. Yeah.
If you're doing one. So let's see. I think I got my start in broadcasting a little earlier than most people that would do WRSU because I was interning for Bruce Johnson at WCTC, the voice of Rutgers athletics, prior to Chris Carlin, from 2004 to 2006, my high school years. So Bruce, who was the voice of Rutgers basketball for 25 years, was one of the greatest mentors one could ever have in broadcasting. So when I showed up at Rutgers and Tim Espar was the broadcast administrator before Mike Pavlichko, and I worked with Mike at WCTC, he had a fairly good idea from Steve Miller and folks at Rutgers that I was coming and that this is what I wanted to do. And so I showed up, I think, with slightly more broadcast background, but I had to learn how to work as a team. Like any 18-year-old, I had to learn about the board, the old school board at WRSU, and how to get board passed by Dan Schleck, who was the tech director at the time. And there was a lot of things that, from an infrastructure perspective, had to be improved. And that was the time that WRSU was doing a ton of construction, updating studios. Obviously still had that old SNL board that they used. But you made note of the travel, and yeah, that was a pretty cool experience, right? Getting to regionally travel a ton. East obviously did not create the most insane travel schedule relative to the Big Ten.
Sure.
But you were all over the Northeast. And then when I went into professional broadcasting, obviously my final year at Rutgers in play-by-play was their first year in the Big Ten. So I was on the road quite a bit those 5+ years after college, doing hired gun work for IMG, Verizon, Fios, Greater Media, the Northeast Conference, and Rutgers.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, sounds like definitely a good time. I mean, in terms of like taking it to the next level, obviously with RVision, being the lead play-by-play broadcaster, and then like you mentioned with IMG doing women's basketball play-by-play for Rutgers, backup for men's basketball, and you also co-hosted a show called Football USA, other experiences as well. You did a lot of high school, so I guess what was your professional experience like doing I guess both play-by-play color, just professional broadcasting for Rutgers and beyond?
Yeah, freelance broadcaster life is not for people who don't have a strong stomach. I mean, I think for the first few years, you have to be willing to take a lot of jobs and gigs that are difficult. You mentioned all that high school sports work, which I had a lot of fun doing. Football USA was Mike Pavlichko's brainchild, so I worked with him on that quite a bit. And the high school sports stuff for Verizon Fios took me all over Long Island, New Jersey, and the city, which was pretty cool. I think to your point, getting to work with Ed Cohen, former voice of the Knicks, who was the voice of Rutgers women's basketball at the time, backing up Chris Carlin, it was amazing, right? Like I obviously had grown up listening to Rutgers basketball on the radio, idolizing Bruce Johnson, and to basically put on that headset and be in that moment was I remember filling in for Chris on a game against Villanova at the RAC. I think at the time he was working for SNY and he had to go down to spring training. So it was February, let's say. And so I went to Seton Hall for the game before, sat with him and shadowed to understand the different promo reads. And it was an unreal, experience. I would recommend it for anyone in their 20s getting to know themselves as a professional, understanding how to put a broadcast together, sell yourself, right? Because in a lot of ways, you're your own salesperson for your own gig work. And getting the mentorship, Gary Cohen was there for Seton Hall. And I remember that day, Chris mentioned to him after the broadcast that I was doing the next game. He was kind enough to walk with me to Newark Penn afterwards from Prudential and just kind of talk through what I should expect later that week. I had done basketball games before, but I had not done a Rutgers game for the network men's side. So that was a pretty amazing moment, in those early parts of your career where you realize, okay, listening to the people who have been there is really important, and that's how you shape your career. But to your point, it's a grind. And I feel like those early parts of my 20s, being on the road a ton, it had its wear and tear. And I think anybody who's been in broadcasting would tell you that.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely a lot of travel, a lot of dedication, a lot of work, a lot of preparation. Like you have to know the ins and outs, I guess on and off the air production side too. But I mean, in terms of like, yeah, I guess calling, that is pretty cool. Calling, the men's game, when Chris Carlin went down to spring training, and I guess yeah, I mean, just having your start with Rutgers and being able to do that at like a pretty high level. I mean, obviously it's like in WRSU you kind of fall in love with a lot of these teams if you haven't already by then, and then I guess getting to do that the same role kind of on a higher level professionally on the Rutgers radio or the IMG Sports Network, they're the professional channel basically. Like that must have been probably like a dream come true for you and probably a lot of other people too.
Without question, a dream come true. I mean, I think for me specifically, as somebody who was going to Rutgers basketball games at that point for probably 18 years.
Yeah.
I was 4 years old or whatever it was. I think when I filled in for Chris on that broadcast, I was probably 23, 24. So yeah, it felt surreal. I also think you have to put into perspective after a while, and looking back at that almost 15 years ago, I'm realizing it's just one game on a Tuesday.
Yeah, that's the weird part. It's like it feels like you put so much work. Like I remember when I was doing them too. Like I put so much work into like doing one or two calls, like in football or whatever the case may be, and then it's just like, oh wow, like that kind of happened, and I did a lot, but yeah, I mean, I feel like the whole experience, just friendships, doing the crew, like the show, was a lot of fun, and for me, it led to a lot of other things. I realized I was a better writer, so I started with On the Banks recently. These podcasts have come out of that, and I feel like I have a gift with like interviewing people, which is like I guess why I like the Just Vibing. But I also do weekly NBA Stanley Cup, so that's all come out of like doing radio and which came from me doing band. So it's like one thing kind of led to another, and like here I am, I guess. So I definitely am grateful though for the experiences, but sometimes it's like interesting to put in perspective, and then like I guess it's kind of like life does move on after that.
Friendships are real. I mean, one of my best friends in life, Adam Helfgott, and I, we hosted
I think I know
Friday Scarlet Pulse, sort of basically derived from our general arguments during college, which was perfect.
It's always great to talk.
At the time, the two arguments were: should Rutgers go to the Big Ten or the ACC, which was incredibly prescient in some ways. He said the Big Ten to give him credit. I felt at the time the ACC was, regionally right. I didn't necessarily anticipate how insane.
Realignment's been crazy.
But yeah, I mean, I think that all of this really, WRSU is and I've said this on other interviews before, a hidden gem at Rutgers that people don't give enough credit to. That it does an unbelievable job of serving the community, having community hosts, having people who have really lived their lives hosting a ethnic-based show on the platform for MIT, and then the sports and news is almost unrivaled for an unheralded broadcast department. So it is something that I take a ton of pride in.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, seeing the news department and being part of the sports department, seeing the other departments and the shows and the ethnic shows, like you mentioned. I mean, everyone does such a great job. I mean, sports teams are going around the country. I mean, doing the talk shows. I mean, everyone's like an expert or really cares about the teams. Like it is definitely a hidden gem. Like I said, I probably wouldn't have found out about it unless I did band, because I wasn't really on the buses a lot, and I actually found an ad on one of the buses for it, and I guess it piqued my interest, and sure enough, so I mean, it kind of, like I said, led to a lot of other things, but like this podcast. But definitely like you said, a hidden gem, something that I would recommend for a lot of people, whether you're into sports or news or music or whatever the case. It's definitely a really good collegiate radio station. But I guess in terms of podcasting, I saw you also had your own Rutgers podcast, the Scarlet Spotlight, which you did with John Newman for several years. So I mean, from March 2018 to December 2022. So I guess what was that, I guess, like for you? Because now me and my friend from On the Banks, Andrew Rice, we started our own podcast called The Bells Must Ring. So we're trying to, I guess, get it into the scale of like some of the bigger ones like Rutgers Rivals and the Night Report and Scarlet, some of the other the big Rutgers shows that I've been a fan of for years. Like when I first started getting into Rutgers sports, that was one of the main, before even WRSU, that was like probably one of the main ways I used to learn more. So I guess now being on the other side, it's really nice to be able to kind of give back and being able to talk about this stuff at a high level. And obviously we're just in the beginning, and I can't wait for football season to do previews, I've guessed. But what's that whole experience, I guess, been like for you to really, talk everything Rutgers, once again?
Scarlet Spotlight was an unbelievable experience. It also was a somewhat selfish endeavor, I think, by both John and me. I had recently graduated business school at that point in 2017. I knew I was no longer going to be in broadcasting because I was switching into business, but I wanted to keep my toe in Rutgers and generally in some way. And it was a generous contribution from John after his father passed away that actually helped launch Night Vision, subsequently RVision, and the app. So I had known John for many years. At that point, probably, let's call it 8, maybe 9. And we decided, hey, there's a white space. The Rutgers Rant hadn't really picked up yet.
Yeah, that's the other one that I like to listen to.
Some of those other shows hadn't really picked up yet. We said there's a bit of a white space for a podcast. And so we also didn't feel that the debate side of it was what we wanted to do. We sort of appendaged a 10-minute news of the week kind of thing at the end where we went back and forth with our own thoughts. But the show was very interview-based. It was, a 30 to 40-minute interview with a guest. Each show, if you go back on the Scarlet Spotlight's website, and they're all archived, there was I think 116 shows over the course of that 4.5 years. The title of the show is almost 98% of the time about the particular person who came on. So that was the crux of the show. And they're amazing interviews. I mean, very deep cut for people who really know Rutgers sports, the types of folks that we had on, administrators, coaches, players, former presidents. We had Governor Murphy on during COVID. There was some incredible stuff. So had an amazing time doing it. Again, slightly selfish endeavor. And it stopped because John and I felt that resource allocation was better spent on the collective.
Yes.
We launched the NIL Collective and Knights of the Raritan. So we were ready, though. It had run its course. There was only so many people left in the Rutgers community that we could interview and get folks to get excited about. But it was an unbelievable experience.
Yeah, no, that sounds really cool. The whole interview base, I mean, I guess it's kind of in some ways what I'm trying to do with just vibing, although it's not always Rutgers. Usually there is a sports tie-in, given like, sports, being sports fan, also people in different aspects of sports media. So it's been fun to, I guess, pick people's brains, and these tend to really do a lot, like even better than the weekly episodes as well. But yeah, I mean, I guess I did definitely want to get to the Knights of the Raritan, but I guess first I wanted to I guess pivot, I guess, to your transition going to the business school at NYU, and I guess your work with you did a few different things there. Several internships with Wasserman, and by NBC Universal and Brave Media Ventures. So it seems like you kind of wanted to take a pivot from the broadcasting to the business side of media, kind of the intersection of sports media and technology. So like, kind of what was, I guess, your vision, going from sports broadcasting to, like, I guess, the media side, and what did you really want to do, with your MBA, I guess?
Well, you nailed it. I mean, I think that the hardest part about business school is getting into it.
Yeah.
I think once you're into it, you can sort of change your story in many different ways. So having a fairly consistent story, which is exactly what you just said, like, I'm from this world, I've done the on-air content creation side, I now want to pivot to the business side. I can help with business development. I can do strategy, partnerships. That was the story. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people show up and then they end up in investment banking or management consulting.
Yeah.
I was like fairly clear that was not going to be my path, right? I had just come off of 5 years on a plane. You're going to send me 5 years on a plane from McKinsey? That wasn't going to happen. So, mentally I said, all right, I need to really turn my resume on its head, because who's going to hire the play-by-play guy to be their business person?
Right.
So those internships you mentioned were critical. Wasserman was valuation and consulting role, where we were working on the NBA jersey patch valuations at the time, which was a pretty cool project, as well as some college sports media rights valuations. NBC Universal was TV Everywhere apps back in the day, when you used to authenticate in those apps with your cable operator to be able to watch content. So think of USA, Sci-Fi, Bravo, all the various NBC Universal apps that they had. Worked on audience development and some of those app launches. And then at Brave Media Ventures, we did a consulting project on what's called OTT, over the top content, basically direct to consumer streaming, for Turner, which ended up acquiring Brave. Not because of my project, but I think they were a long time thinking about acquiring these guys. And Dave Beck and Jesse Redness have since moved on to high level media roles as executives at Bright Cove and at Data.org recently. So learned a ton, and then came out of business school at Fusion Media Group, which was a house of brands as part of Univision. So it had The Onion, it had those old Gawker brands, so the Gizmodo Media Group brands like Deadspin, Jalopnik, Jezebel, LaRoot. Very, very cool being a part of strategy for these brands, but the merger of them didn't exactly work. So there was a reorganization, and I also said to myself at the time, I got to get away from the cost center where you're spending money on marketing and strategy. So I got to the revenue side, and I went to a Comcast joint venture with Charter and Cox called iNDEMAND, which was you would never know of it, but they're the middleman between all of your pay-per-view events, movies on demand on set-top boxes when people used to do that, and out-of-market sports packages like MLB Network, NBA League Pass, NHL Center Ice. So I did a ton of content licensing deals and content delivery deals during that time. And then the last 3.5 years, I ended up at Frequency, which is a software platform to help launch streaming channels. So you want to build a channel with ads and send it to any of the platforms. You have to build it, create it with Frequency or one of their competitors, and deliver it to Roku, Samsung, et cetera. So doing deals, business development, strategy, rev ops over the last 3.5 years, and now working on what's next.
Yeah, no, that sounds cool. So it's like you took a whole pivot from, like you said, sports or broadcasting to the media side, doing partnership deals and everything. So I guess, yeah, I mean, in terms of like in demand and in demand and frequency. Obviously for frequency, like you mentioned, you're like you director of business development, distribution partnerships, and then eventually the senior director of revenue operations and strategy. So I guess like what it's kind of similar positions that you had at In Demand first, but I guess you kind of already did kind of mention it, but like what exactly does all of that like entail in terms of these partnerships with these streaming platforms and TV deals?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different. What In-Demand was doing was content licensing, right? Where they worked with the studio, they represented content for all the cable operators in America, right? That's the easiest way I can describe it.
Okay,
So
yeah, makes sense.
with Comcast and say, okay, you want to acquire all of these films from Sony Pictures and you want to be able to distribute them for transactional video on demand on Comcast X1 platforms. In-Demand would do the deal. The content would be available to the full cable footprint. When I was at Frequency, it was a software as a service deal. Hey, you want to use Frequency software to physically build a 24/7 linear channel, a streaming channel that sits on the Roku channel, Samsung Freevee, which is now just Amazon Prime Video. All these platforms, great. Come to Frequency when you have distribution, build the channel, and we'll spin it up and deliver it to all the places that need it, because every platform, as you can imagine, has their own spec, has their own way of getting things. Nobody makes it easy. So the platforms have sort of built like a moat of 5 preferred vendors where you got to go and work with one of them in order to get the channel to them, because they don't want to receive 300 channels from 300 different places. But very interesting. Learned a ton about the ad-supported side of the business, as well as software and working with legal, product, engineering, operations, all the different teams that you have to get a deal done with.
Yeah, that's cool. So it seems like In Demand was more like licensing deals and sports packages and movies, things like that, and then Frequency was kind of like with the fast channels, like it's almost like people wanted to create their own channels and stuff like that, like putting all of that together, building the software for that and operating that. And that is really cool, because that is like, I guess, where I think you even posted on LinkedIn like a few weeks ago about this, but that is kind of where things are going with the smart TVs and the fast channels that aren't really even on cable, but you could find them on the menu. Like I know I have that with my TV, and I hardly even like really use that, because it's just,
and that's all free. I mean, it's all included as part of you having an account, right? I mean, I'm not trying to do a free ad-supported streaming television here, but yeah, you turn on a Samsung TV and the first thing you have is Samsung TV Plus.
Yeah, exactly. There's like all these different apps and all this. There's a whole bunch of channels that I didn't even know about.
Yeah, 400 channels.
Yeah.
Somebody owns 200 hours of the Ed Sullivan Show, and they put together an Ed Sullivan Show 24/7 channel. That's
pretty cool. Like, I guess it's like all the channels that only have music, and all the channels that have this and that. And
Vivo and Stingray. Yeah, they're big for those music only channels. You'd be surprised how well those channels actually do in streaming. The Yule log channel at holiday time with just the fireplace log. That's it's crazy how many pieces of content there is.
It's really interesting. Yeah. It's definitely different than I mean, obviously for me, like as a sports fan, like I have all the like it's like during football season I'll flip from like Big Ten to ACC to this and like watch like 10 games at once. But the regional sports networks like MSG and there's just like so many different things you could do with TV channels. So it's really never ending.
The viewer experience is changing too. I mean, the regional sports networks are in significant trouble. Right?
That's true.
For them to do as they are, and you can see they're all going direct to consumer with apps, just because they imagine that.
They have all the streaming services.
Yeah, I mean, the initial environment that somebody watches these things now is just turning on their smart TV and seeing whatever apps they have in front of them. So, the real question is how do we recreate the remote channel flipping concept, because that doesn't exist because of the buffering and the latency and all that.
Oh, true. Yeah, that would be very difficult. Yeah, for sure. That's interesting though. And then wow. It's like a whole nother world out there. But I guess in terms of your in terms of like your next step, obviously with the the DMB Progress, that I guess you said you just got started being a business development consultant with, I guess, media technology and sports business consulting, like this, what does that represent for you? And like, is that like your way of kind of like tying everything in that you've done in the past and kind of helping other people to kind of get on the same like path or something similar?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's a play on words, right? Driving more business progress. My initials are Danny Breslauer, so it's
I like that.
It was an available LLC name, so I'm happy for it. But I mean, I think it'll be a way that I can work with people that I've known a long time in the industry that are starting new things, or for legacy companies that want to try new business development approaches. I think there's obviously, again, a selfish tinge to it in terms of potentially something short term turning into something long term. And I have many thoughts on what that could all look like in a short term environment in summer of 2025 with the types of companies that I would target for those kind of project based items. But no, I mean, I don't think there's any long term take over the world thing that I have in my mind for the LLC. I think it's a fairly smart concept to have one just to have, right? At all points in your life, you're going to want to consult.
That's true.
Legally, it's a good idea to have one of these things, so you're not running it through your own personal liability. So
that's fair. Yeah. Because like one of my professors in my so I'm an HR major actually. One of my professors, like he does like HR consulting, and he did this whole class on like finding yourself or like learning about yourself and stuff. I found it like really inspirational, so I think I even like posted about it on like LinkedIn and stuff. But yeah, he also has his own like consulting thing. So I guess I always thought about it like he does like private coaching and stuff like that. So I guess the way I thought about it was like, yeah, it's almost like your way to help people and give back. And I guess in a way, yeah, for you, like, without putting it on your own like liability, having like your own like enterprise, like company to kind of do that. But I mean, I feel like given all the work that you've done like within the industry already, and this could be the next way for you to, I guess, kind of bring it forward and figure out what's kind of next in your career in terms of stuff like that.
Well, thank you, Arnav. Your mouth to whomever's listening.
Yeah, hopefully.
I think that would be great. And there's a lot of ways it can go, but I think that BD partnerships, how we're thinking about work now is changing very, very rapidly. And as someone who was a student far more recently than I am, I'm sure you have a better understanding about how your peers are thinking about job functions and work, and how many functions are going to change with technology adjusting what these jobs actually mean. So that's going to be a really unique theme to follow, I want to say, in the next year or two, is how quickly some of these companies adopt what it means to work in their environments. So I think that's also part of what I want to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely. With everything, changing with technology. I mean, we just talked about the fast channels and everything with that, and the streaming services, and with like NFL, like for example, like they're on so many different platforms. They're going to be on YouTube. They're on Netflix. It's just like, this whole new world of streaming. I mean, NBA is moving back to NBC. There's just like a lot going on in that, even in just the sports space alone, in terms of these streaming services and Amazon, and like it's a whole new world like out there. So I mean, yeah, if you can, if you with your expertise helping people kind of navigate that and figure out what they want to do with their their next steps, and how moving into this even more digital age, it's definitely important.
Yeah, sports rights have historically been like a 30-year mortgage on a house, right? Like you see a bunch of these leagues that bounce around every couple decades. Play-by-play guys talk about it all the time, that it was devastating for them at a certain point in their career when ESPN lost hockey, or when they lost basketball, because they had to reevaluate what network they were working for,
right? Yep.
Even what sport they worked on, right? I think Sean McDonough and Gary Thorne, who were on ESPN hockey for a very, very long time, they obviously got hockey back now, but their careers changed overnight. Gary Thorne had to go focus on baseball. McDonough focused on, he did everything, but he did a bunch of different things. So it's unique, especially for the studio hosts. They have to bounce around a different network. That means uprooting your family. So the sports rights stuff is very nuanced, and especially with the digital players like Amazon and YouTube, Google, in that sense, getting involved, I anticipate that so many more of these broadcasters and crews, because the crews are changing and what technology it's going to change overnight.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a new age, as we mentioned. I guess pivoting over before we end the episode to Knights of the Raritan. I know that's another big hot topic with college sports. We have our new president, William Tate. That's another thing. Maybe you could also speak on what that means. Obviously a big athletics proponent with LSU. So me and Andrew and I'm assuming the rest of the Rutgers fan base is pretty enthused about the move. But in terms of NIL, I mean, Knights of the Raritan, I mean, I know what they do and everything. I feel like that's so important to be able to keep up with NIL, and I feel like Rutgers, to an extent, has been a little bit maybe behind, or they've had a little bit less funds, but I feel like Knights of the Raritan really tries to make it like a kind of a crowdfunding thing, and allows kind of the alumni to give back, and I feel like that's so important. That being said, I feel like I don't know. I just feel like it's kind of almost a catch-22 with Rutgers, because I feel like it's because of some of the performance of Rutgers, and like it hasn't really inspired a lot of fans of support, and even the support like tends to not be financial, which I completely get. It's really hard to convince people to put even more money into the programs beyond going to games, beyond. But I like how they do the NIL jerseys. I think that's good. I think this is good. I feel like another thing that Rutgers maybe could do is, a lot of these schools, they have big alumni backing, or they have alumni pay huge amounts, and I feel like maybe Rutgers needs that, because I know I'm sure they have a lot of successful alumni. I feel like it should be a mix, but I mean, as the founder of Knights of the Raritan, I guess if we could just speak on some of the stuff I said, like, do you agree like that? Do you think it should be like a mix of crowdfunding and the other thing, and big alumni donations, or how do you think Rutgers really can keep up? Because I feel like with football, I think I like what they kind of do with the NIL and the portal. I feel like especially in men's basketball, and it could be a little bit lacking. But how do you think Rutgers kind of keeps up with these other schools going forward with NIL, and how does Knights of the Raritan, I guess, continue to be a big player in that?
Winning begets money. So
that's true.
That's number one. I mean, late 21, John Newman brought a crew of us together. It's a great board. You can read up on it, knightsoftheraritan.com. We've been a membership model, as you mentioned, since we launched in May 2022. I think it's fairly clear that over time, especially with NIL legislation, that is going to change. Corporate dollars will become more important if the Deloitte clearinghouse for any of the individual deals becomes more of a thing. But I think you can do some math. And Arnav, I did this on Twitter the other day. I think I said, we say 500,000 living Rutgers alumni, and I'm going to be very aggressive and say 20% are willing to give to athletics, and that's so high. It's probably 10%.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Let's go 10%.
Okay.
10% is 50,000 people. And let's say they give on average $25 a month, right? Yeah. So that's 15 million bucks.
Yeah.
15 million bucks a year. Okay. You could have 3 donors at $5 million bucks do that. Or
that's the thing. Yeah, that's
the issue. So if you're, who are you going to go after if you're the new AD, or if you're William Tate and you're helping on athletics? I think the answer still becomes larger donors are going to move the needle, and then work on a corporate donor strategy. Get dollars in that are going to.
Yeah, I think that's another important piece of it.
Yeah, that's something that needs to be pushed. Whether the membership model remains in place, I think there's a place for it. Maybe whether it's within the collective, I don't know. Whether the universities are able to police it with new legislation, let's see. There's always going to be a need for a payment processor and someone to do the legal. And you see Rutgers posting roles for basically that kind of job, the NIL cap management within compliance. So there's infrastructure being put into place. I think in the long run, though, the large donors and the corporate dollars are how NIL was always run, and will continue to be. But KTR has been an unbelievable experience for me. I've met people as part of this board that I probably otherwise never would have had this kind of relationship with. And they're some of the most passionate people about Rutgers athletics than you could ever want to meet.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think I agree. I think, like you said, like we did the math. Like, I mean, Yeah, I feel like it's a bit of both. I feel like, yeah, like the large donors and having a corporate strategy, I think would definitely be the what moves the needle. And then on top of that, having a good crowdfunding strategy or collective like Knights of the Raritan. Like you said, if 10% of people donate or alumni, and even if it's just $25 a month, like not asking a lot, I mean, that can go a long way. I feel like part of it's outreach. I know they've tried to make efforts, like they put it on the scoreboard, but maybe a little bit more like explanation as to what really all of that is and why it's important. Like obviously me and a lot of people do know, but sometimes it's hard to.
We're also chronically online, and I think
That's true. Yeah, a lot of people aren't, you know what I mean? We're always like looking up sports and Rutgers sports too.
we're living in this chronically online sports bubble that we think is a thing, and it isn't a thing.
Yeah.
So that's something that I've had to mentally adjust my own thinking about. But I think in the long run, corporate dollars and the larger donors are the way you do it. And the problem right now, as you said, chicken and egg with Rutgers, is there is not a large subset of those angel kind of donors.
It's unfortunate. We need to like convince a few of them to do. And I feel like at least football, they are getting better. Basketball, I mean, look, they just had Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper. They've attracted star power. Maybe the roster around them wasn't the greatest, but I feel like the potential is definitely there, and the programs are on the rise. I mean, I was just writing articles on like Rutgers women's rowing. They've made going to nationals, track and field. I mean, lacrosse. There's so many sports that are like doing well, representing the university well. Yeah. So there's definitely a place for it. It's a Big Ten program. I mean, in all sports, and just to be able to keep up, I mean, you really do have to put the money where the mouth is, whether you like it or not. Like as Coach Giano says, you do have to kind of follow along with it, and he does make an effort with that, and I think that that's probably the way to do it. Pikel as well, like they putting an effort to really do that. But I guess that kind of does pivot me to, I guess, the final thing about this episode. Obviously, me and you both now alumni, but big Rutgers sports fans, and probably a lot more than that. But in terms of just football and basketball, Rutgers football coming off 7-6, 7-5 regular season. They've made moves to better the roster. I mean, Ethan Kalkmanis looks good. I mean, the team's really shifted from a defensive-minded team to a team that really has a good passing offense for the first time in a long time. Run game, they have solid replacements. I mean, obviously Monunga is going out, but Antoine Raymond. I mean, they have a few different backs. They have the transfer portal getting Eric O'Neill, Bradley Weaver, so many guys on the defense to bolster it. I mean, this team looks like pretty good, but the problem is the schedule does too. So do you think that amounts to a similar record? Do you think Rutgers has a chance to win 7 to 8 games? Because that's where I would project them. I think there's a lot of 50-50s. They should win the non-conference games, even though the MAC teams are a bit tougher this year, but and then games against Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, probably going to be losses, maybe even Illinois, but I still see a good path for 7-8 wins and to continue to build on what was pretty solid last few seasons.
I think getting 7+ probably hinges on starting 4-0 with Ohio.
Yeah, I think Iowa is going to be that always seems to be Rutgers' like Super Bowl game for some reason. Like it's like they're kind of out of reach, but like maybe not this year. So we'll see about them.
I mean, that'll probably be 10-7, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah, they're like Rutgers like 2.0. So like,
right, although I mean, I think they've tried to philosophically change. That Ferentz was the first ever $3 million coach when I was like 12. But there, and it's remarkable. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think 6-6 is probably an expectation, and you hope to steal a couple because you said the schedule is brutal.
Yeah,
4-0, everything changes and a lot of expectations happen. Kalkmanis is going to be a very solid quarterback and obviously a veteran. And you mentioned the running back room is deep. I think the wide receivers are
oh my goodness. Yeah, DJ Sheffield coming in, or DJ Sheffield. Yeah.
Oh, terrific. I love his game. You could call
Strong was great last year, yes.
Yeah, they're good. And the defense will be fine. Losing Mo Toure stinks, but like the defense will be a typical Shiano defense. On basketball, I'm a basketball first guy. It's gonna be tough to find scoring. I mean, I think Zerno is a really nice get. I've heard from a lot of people that
I like that a lot. Yeah,
fairly coveted. Dylan Grant is going to be a stud. I think we all know that. Jermichael Davis coming back. Question will become post play. Agbole, Fall. What do you have? What do the wings look like? What do the portal pickups do? The Tariq Francis and scoring, is Buchanan able to provide you what you need as a slasher?
Yeah.
What freshman can contribute? Is Lino Mark ready to go from day one or soon thereafter? So There's a lot of question marks, but I think it'll be more of a Pikel team, better rim protection, better grind out in the high 50s, low 60s. So Big Ten schedule actually shook out fairly positively. I thought that it wasn't the most insane Big Ten schedule. They'll likely have 7 quad 4 home games at Seton Hall and then the 3.
Right.
So if you look at trying to get to 500 again, right? I think that's sort of where we're at this team, and whether that means 8-3 out of conference, 7-13 in, or something like that. That's probably what you're looking at. So that's pretty much on par with what you did last year. You'd like better, but that's probably the expectation.
Yeah, and I mean, I think given all the roster turnover and the expectations that Rutgers had last year, obviously crashing out kind of in the worst way, not really having their best roster. I feel like even if Rutgers had a very similar season to last year, this year, I feel like a lot of Rutgers fans would probably be on board with that, and then maybe they develop into a contender again 2-3 years.
That's not the model anymore. You can't develop.
It's all about NIL and transfer portal and this and that 1 year at a time.
Retention's important. That's obviously part of Pikel's strategy. He's developed a culture. JaMychal Davis being 3 years in one place, that's not going to happen a lot anymore.
Right.
Grant was enormous. Bryce Dortch, also a big one. You could see some of the potential at the end of the year there. I'm missing some names, obviously. Ware, Powers, Nwuli, going to be very good from what I've heard. So. This is all, and Badalao, who just signed from Romania. So
yes,
listen, who knows, right? I mean, I think that it's a unique team. Where do you find 65 points? I don't have the answer, but that's the speed limit. 65.
Right? Yeah, no, I think that's We'll see. We'll see how it goes. It should be a good one. More Pikel-minded team. So I feel like the way he coaches that probably has a chance of having at least as much, if not more, success. But then even with all the star power they had last year, Dylan Ace going to the draft. But I think that's just about as much time we had. Obviously you're retiring the 5 thoughts, which is I think what I really appreciated and really enjoyed. But going into next season. But I'm sure we'll.
I haven't died, but yes, 5 keys and 5 thoughts are done. I won't be hosting spaces. I'll let somebody else step in and do that. But I'm not going away. It's not as if I will never eat. But yeah, dude, it took a lot of work to put those.
That's fair. I know. I know how it is, and I really appreciated that, like the analysis and just kind of knowing what to expect game to game, and especially 5 keys, 5 thoughts. So yeah, definitely a lot of good work that you did. But yeah, like you said, you're not dying. You'll still be around. You'll still be tweeting. I'm sure I will too. So I'm looking forward to next season for Rutgers, football, basketball, whatever. Great to continue to be involved, especially with On the Banks now. But this has been a really good episode. I definitely want to dive deep into your background with both broadcasting and media and beyond, and everything that you've been involved with. And obviously, I wish you the best, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. But this has been another episode of Just Vibing, episode 12 with Danny Breslauer, and we'll see which other great guests we can get for the future. In terms of my schedule, I'll probably the usual NBA Stanley Cup episode coming soon. Scheduled probably Thursday night, and then we'll see how it goes on from there. Bells must ring probably Friday this week. But in the meantime, this has been another episode of Just Vibing, and we will see you next time.